Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MetrObelisk Radio. What you're about to watch is the second part of a 3-hour collaboration that I did with Krazy Joe of the MegaPodTastic YouTube channel and podcast via Skype, ranking the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Infinity Saga. If you have not yet watched part 1, the link to that video will be in the description below on whatever platform you are viewing this on, and it is highly recommended that you watch part 1 before you watch part 2. Doctor Strange. I rank this at number 8. You rank this at number 22.
Yeah, this is in my bottom 3. And to be fair to the movie, I think it has less to do with Doctor Strange, the movie, and more to do with I just don't have a good feel for the character. He's never been one of my favorite characters. He's never a character I've ever picked up. I've never had a desire to pick up a comic and read a Doctor Strange comic. He's not like my good friend Rick, down the movie Rick.
Yeah.
I was asking him, I was shocked he never saw Superman the movie, Christopher Reeve, Superman the movie. And he says, well, I just don't like Superman. I don't like the character. Okay. And I guess that's what it comes down to. It's not like I hate Doctor Strange. I just never cared about Doctor Strange. So then I saw the movie, and I mean, it's a Doctor Strange movie. There's no two ways about it. It's a Doctor Strange movie. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It wasn't my thing exactly. Though I did like Doctor Strange a lot better in Infinity War. I thought him and Tony bouncing off each other, their dynamic together was terrific. So I don't know. I'm excited for the second one, especially because Sam Raimi's doing it. I'm excited that Sam Raimi's doing the second one, but
really?
Yeah, no.
He replaced Scott Derrickson?
Yeah.
Okay. Because originally I was originally terrified of Multiverse of Madness because Scott Derrickson was fired over creative differences, and what that told me is that Disney was too scared to go down the horror route. But now they brought in Sam Raimi. Okay, I could see that. Same guy who did Evil Dead.
The only thing that worries me about that is, and let's go back to Spider-Man 3 for a second. I always hear people say, well, Spider-Man 3 was the studio's fault. The studio ruined Spider-Man 3. I'm going to hit you up with my controversial opinion. No, the studio's not responsible for Spider-Man 3. Sam Raimi is responsible for Spider-Man 3. The worst things in Spider-Man 3 can only be blamed on Sam Raimi, not the studio. Because what we know is the studio insisted he use Venom. Okay? And Venom is a character he admittedly didn't care for. All right. Well, now you look at Spider-Man 3, you say, okay, well, the studio ruined it. They made him use Venom. All right. What is the worst things in Spider-Man 3? It's not Venom. The worst things in Spider-Man 3 are Peter dancing in a jazz club. It's I like to call him Exposition Butler. Exposition Butler, who's been there the whole time, but decided not until the very last minute to go, Spider-Man didn't kill your father, Harry. Your father died by his own hand. I cleaned his wounds. And it's like, so you could have said this at any time, and you waited to the worst things. Amnesia Green Goblin. I bumped my head and I forget now that I hate Spider-Man. The worst things in the movie weren't Venom. But what did the studio insist on? They insisted on Venom. So you can't tell me that was studio interference. Sam Raimi, who's a genius and I love him. I love the Evil Dead movies, and he made my favorite Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man 2. That was Sam Raimi's decisions that screwed that movie up. I'm sorry. So Sam Raimi gave us 2 terrific Spider-Man movies, and then he crapped the bed on one. And I put the blame on him, not on Sony. So that's the only thing that worries me. But yeah, no, I'm excited about him doing Doctor Strange 2.
So do I need to ask you about Eric Foreman being cast as Venom or not?
I didn't have a problem with that. Obviously, it doesn't look like the comic book version, but I was okay with that because I kind of liked the idea of like Venom being a mirror image of Spider-Man, and Topher Grace had the same kind of look as Tobey Maguire. Like he looked like he could have played Peter Parker, frankly. And I would have bought it. So like I liked, but people are always, oh no, Eddie Brock is like big and muscular and built, and It's like, okay, but I could also see the Bizarro version where it's like, oh no, we're gonna do
Hmm.
like he's Peter's mirror. I think that's just as valid. So I didn't really have a problem with that.
Hmm. Okay, because I always felt that Topher Grace was woefully miscast as Eddie Brock. And that's more just due to his demeanor, because he also doesn't have a powerful enough voice. He always comes across as very mousy. Like, I see him and automatically I think Eric Foreman. Where it's like, okay, Donna. Okay, Donna.
Yeah, but Tobey Maguire's like that too, though. Don't you think? Like, I think that's like kind of I could see that being a good like balance for Tobey Maguire because I kind of see them as being very similar. I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
Yeah, I always found that like that was always Spider-Man, was that by day he was like the nerdy type, the guy that was always being bullied, and then by night he's Spider-Man in the very heroic gesture. So at least under the suit it's more believable, but like Eddie Brock, it's like not with how much they showed his face versus Venom. If they had showed a lot more Venom and less Eddie Brock, I think it would have worked.
Yeah, well, it is not a fine film.
Yeah.
Not a fine film.
So yeah. So yeah, anyway, back to Doctor Strange. My biggest issue with this movie is all the humor that's thrown in it, because it's thrown in at the worst possible timing. Like I said, the one scene I think of is the one where Doctor Strange is fighting Mads Mikkelsen's character. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. And it's the one where like he's extending the hallway, and Doctor Strange gets him on the ground, ground and pounding after the third punch, stops midway, and then goes, tells a punchline, and then finishes the fight, completely killing all the tension that was built up. Just like that.
See, and here's the funny thing. I don't really remember that because I've only seen the movie once. It's one I saw that I saw Doctor Strange in the theater and never revisited it.
Mm.
So I don't remember. I'm gonna have to rewatch it again.
Okay, because I was gonna say, without all that, like, I don't mind the humor in the Marvel movies, but if it hadn't been in all the worst places, for me personally, this would have probably been my either number three or number four. Because I'm the opposite of you. I actually really dug Doctor Strange when I read him, because he was always kind of like the weird type and always going into more of the cosmic and the horror realm. Like and another part I really didn't like was the, Dormammu, I have a message for you. And Dormammu keeps killing him, and then he keeps coming back. It's a vaudeville gag, Family Guy gag that just goes on for too long.
See that I remember kind of enjoying. I don't know. I'm gonna have to see it again. I don't.
Okay.
But yeah. Another thing. Another thing is I always kind of saw Doctor Strange as the poor man's Doctor Fate. Like I
All right,
was
you're
like,
gonna have to expand on that. I don't know who Dr. Fate is.
Doctor Fate is a DC Comics character who is a sorcerer, and he's just like Doctor Strange basically, except he dates back to the 1940s. So
Okay.
he was around a lot longer. So I always kind of saw Doctor Strange as being kind of maybe a little bit of a ripoff of Doctor Fate.
Okay,
It,
so
it,
like a Superman Captain Marvel kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. In fact, in the 90s, I don't know if you remember this, but in the 90s they had Amalgam Comics. Do you remember Amalgam Comics where the Marvel and DC characters got merged into one?
Oh yeah. I wasn't
Uh,
alive during that time, but I remember that because both Marvel and DC were going through financial woes, and so let's
right.
combine Spider-Man and Batman is the one I remember.
Yeah. Well, no, I think Batman was Wolverine. They combined Batman and Wolverine. It was called like the Dark Claw or something.
Okay.
Uh, it was right when they did Marvel versus DC. They did a mini series called Marvel versus DC, and as a spin off of it, the characters got mixed together. Yeah, here it is. This is I don't know if you can see my phone here. Can you see that?
Uh
That's Dark
yeah.
Claw. He was Batman combined with Wolverine,
Okay.
and Doctor Fate got merged with Doctor Strange, and they became Doctor Strange Fate. So I always remember that Doctor Strange fate. Let's see.
All right. Joe, can you give me a quick second? I just need to get up and get my bottle of water.
Yeah, sure.
All right. All right. Sorry, it's in a spot where it's out of arm's reach.
Oh, it's fine.
All right.
Yeah, so they did Doctor Strange fate, and it was basically Doctor Fate, but he was wearing Doctor Strange's cape.
Okay.
Yeah. So no, it's not a bad movie. I think my ranking of Doctor Strange is more just based on my indifference to the character than it actually not being. I think that's more than anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got nothing more to say on Doctor Strange because it's kind of just a basic movie when you actually break it down. It's a good
Yeah.
it's a good introduction for the character and a tease for things later on, but it's Doctor Strange is either a character you either love or you don't kind of thing, like what we're seeing here.
Yeah. I mean, well, he's Doctor Strange, and
Mm-hmm.
he is a little strange. So it's like, you're either into it or you're not. So I don't know.
uh-huh.
It's fine though.
Yeah. All right. So our next ranking on the list is the second of only two movies that we actually agreed on, and number 16 is Captain Marvel. We both ranked this at number 13 because that's just how the math works.
Yeah, no, I liked Captain Marvel. I remember I saw
Mhm.
Captain Marvel. I was laid off last year. Last March, I was laid off. And so oddly enough, last March and this March, I spent all my time at home in the house. What do you know? Uh, uh,
One of yeah. I was
but no,
about to say like one of them was a unfortunate circumstance, and the other one is just like, oh crap, not another pandemic. Here we go.
well, I went and saw Captain Marvel 4 times. In part because I didn't have anything else to do. I was laid off. And in part because I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. And we should point out that Captain Marvel was one of two Captain Marvel movies that came out last year because a month later
Yes.
Shazam came out, and Shazam was traditionally also known as Captain Marvel. I liked Shazam better of the two, but I enjoyed the crap out of Captain Marvel. I thought it had that great buddy cop feel with
Mhm.
Carol and Nick Fury together. I'm a sucker. I I'll admit it, it's easy. It is so easy, but you can play me like a fiddle. You give me the nostalgia, you've
Mhm.
got me. You've got me. The Wonder Woman 84 trailer did it too. You show me Wonder Woman fighting villains in a mall in the 80s. And they're playing 80s music. The New Order, sold. You've got me, because I grew up in the 80s. I remember that. I love that. You've hit my nostalgia bone. So all the
Uh-huh.
90s music and all the 90s references and having Captain Marvel crash land in a blockbuster, yes,
Yes.
maybe you're tugging at my nostalgia heartstrings, and maybe it's an easy thing, but damn it, you did it and it worked and I enjoyed it. So
Yeah.
and I loved the scrolls. And the scrolls, I'll tell you, a lot of people get upset when they deviate from the comics. A lot of people, if there's a
Hmm.
deviation, they'll be like, "Oh, I don't like that. That's not the way it is." But sometimes I really enjoy that because I think I know where a story's going. If I know the characters, if I know the comics, I think I know where a story's going. And if you decide to deviate, you've now given me a surprise that I didn't see coming. So the twist of making the scrolls the good guys, I
Hmm.
wasn't expecting that. It was a fun surprise. And also, uh, Ben Mendelsohn, he always plays the bad guy. He always plays the bad guy. So when we find out in this one, no, this time around, he's not the bad guy. We fooled you. He's actually the good guy. I enjoyed the crap out of that.
So I'm gonna ask this question. So I assume you know the origins of like the Skrull Kree War in the Marvel comics.
Yes.
Then okay,
Yes.
yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know, would you explain it?
Oh, geez. You're asking me to really dig into old memories here because it's been a long time. I don't remember how it started, but I know that the Skrulls and the Kree traditionally do not like each other.
Mm-hmm.
Is that oversimplifying it, or do we need to go deep?
Um, I'm the same way. I don't remember how it started. All I remember is like neither side was really the good guy side because both of them were just as bad. And so
Yeah,
what
yeah,
Earth would do was that they would keep the two focused on each other. That way they didn't come down to Earth and just wipe out all of mankind. Just, hey, let's get these two to wipe each other out kind of
right.
thing. So that's why, in the comics, like Captain Marvel didn't really side with the Skrull or the Kree. He or she would always side with Earth because yes, Captain Marvel wasn't always a female. And I'll say this with Captain Marvel, I don't dislike Carol Danvers as Captain Marvel, but
I,
I really don't like Brie Larson in the role.
See, I'm a huge Brie Larson fan, so I'm always
Okay.
I'm always happy when Brie Larson's doing anything. I got introduced to Brie Larson when she was on Community, which is my favorite sitcom of all time, and she played Abed's girlfriend on Community. Uh, but yeah, no, I liked her. And there have been several Captain Marvels too. Aside from DC having Shazam being a Captain Marvel, she was originally Miss Marvel in the comics,
Yeah.
and her best friend's daughter in the movie, uh, Monica, eventually became a Captain Marvel too. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's a ton of Captain Marvels in the Marvel universe.
Yeah. So pretty much is, I only really have two main complaints with the movie, and that the first one is really the final fight between Captain Marvel and Jan Rog. That was Jude Law's character. I felt it was just kind of over really quickly. Like Jan Rog being her mentor, he should have known her fighting style like in and out, kind of like Anakin versus Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith. If they had been training for years upon years, you're gonna know each other's strengths and weaknesses, kind of thing. And then all of a sudden it's just bam, I don't have to prove myself to you.
But I think the difference though is that she never unleashed on him before. She was never at full power before.
Yeah, because he was always trying to tell her to, calm down and don't get too overpowered because
Exactly.
you're going to go into a rage and what happens, happens. And if we're talking Captain Marvel, I got to bring this up. And I refuse to call this movie feminist propaganda. And for one reason and one reason only, I feel that all of that stuff was added in the editing because that was perpetuated by the trailer, and that obviously enraged some people at the time, and rightfully so because they did the same stuff with the 2016 Ghostbusters, where if you don't support this, you're a sexist, misogynist, whatever ist you want to throw out there.
The funny thing is there are some trolls on YouTube. I never want to say their names because they're the worst of the worst. But they kept calling this movie feminist. Oh, it was feminist propaganda. It's only
Yeah.
feminist in that the hero happened to be a woman. There's no like feminist messages in this movie. Again, I'm going to pick on my favorite target here. If you want to see a superhero property that is quite literally shoving politics down your throat, go turn on Supergirl on the CW. I'm always going to beat up on Supergirl. I hate the show. But the average episode of Supergirl is jamming 20 pounds of politics down your throat at all times.
Mhm.
And quite frankly, it's not there in Captain Marvel. It's just not there.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Anyone calling Captain Marvel feminist propaganda is not being intellectually honest. Because for those of us that have seen the movie, a little bit is there, but it's not so overbearing where it's, shoving down your throat the entire movie.
I think it all comes down to what Brie Larson was attributed a quote that she didn't say, a quote she never said. But what Brie Larson did say was she gave an interview before the movie where she said she wanted a more inclusive press corps.
Yeah.
She wanted more women there because she didn't think that 40-year-old men uh, were necessarily going to be the target audience. And she said, she doesn't need to hear what 40-year-old men think about 40-year-old white men think because they're not necessarily the target audience. And that turned into Brie Larson said she doesn't want white men to see her movie. It's
Mm-hmm.
not what she said. That is not what she
Yeah.
said. But that's what it got turned into. So I think the whole feminist slant came from this misattributing what she said. It's not what's in the movie, but it's this imaginary slight that didn't actually happen, but that if it did happen at all, it
Mm-hmm.
happened outside of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that quote. Wasn't she at like an award show when she just gets up on stage and says, I don't care what a 40-year-old white dude thinks about A Wrinkle in Time. It wasn't made for him.
Yeah, and you know what? That's accurate. I'm a 40-year-old white guy and I didn't want to see A Wrinkle in Time. I saw the trailer and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's not a movie for
Yeah,
me.
but Yeah, but people assume that is just, like the absolute like Hollywood arrogance type of thing cuz like, oh, here we go, another celebrity here to lecture us Americans kind of thing. Oh, duddy.
I
But
don't know.
yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of the feminist propaganda has to do with really the marketing of the movie because if they didn't push that as hard as they did, you would still have a pretty decent movie at the end of it. It's almost like Marvel Studios didn't even need to do that first trailer. What makes her a hero? And you show the her and then add the O at the end. It's like, I know what you're doing. You're just trying to get all the rage bait, the rage clicks. And initially, I didn't want to see Captain Marvel as a result of that.
To this day, one of my one video that I put up that got the most downvotes, the most thumbs downs, and the most angry comments was one where I pointed out the day Captain Marvel opened, the very day it opened, I showed proof proof that people were review bombing the movie and that their reviews weren't legitimate because it had
Mm-hmm.
a really rotten score, an audience score on Rotten
Yeah.
Tomatoes. And I showed the numbers and I said, this was Friday morning. Friday morning, the movie had only played to Thursday night preview audiences. That was it. Only Thursday night preview audiences had seen the movie. And
Mm-hmm.
I showed the number of downvotes and angry comments and negative reviews that this movie had on Friday
Mm-hmm.
and compared it with the amount of votes Infinity War had the year before. And there were more votes on Captain Marvel than Infinity War had a full year prior. And I said, no, wait a minute. This is proof that these people didn't see this movie. Because you can't tell me more people saw Captain Marvel on Thursday night than saw Infinity War in a full year. And
Mm-hmm.
that's proof that these negative reviews are false. They're from trolls, and this isn't real. And people came out of the woodwork in my comments, trashing me for daring to say this. Oh, you're a social justice warrior, blah blah blah. You're not a real man if you can
Mm-hmm.
support this movie, blah blah. And it was just like, and I later found out that weekend there was a group of people that were basically on YouTube sitting looking for any video that mentioned Captain Marvel or Brie Larson and just doing that.
Yeah. Well, um, hold on. Let me get my thoughts together for a second. Okay. Yeah, because what I was going to say is referring to the trolling, I feel that it's fair to also mention this is, do you remember Rotten Tomatoes used to have a want to see score?
Yes.
It was basically, do you want to see this movie, yes or no? And a lot of people were saying no. And so Rotten Tomatoes got rid of it entirely and the narrative at the time was, oh, they're doing that to protect Disney and Captain Marvel. So the review bombing on the Thursday night screenings, was that a result of, Rotten Tomatoes and Disney, working together to silence the critics? So I feel like there are some people like just dedicated to just, we're going to hate this movie no matter what. The same thing happened with Black Panther, if you remember that back in 2018. But I feel that part of the blame needs to be put on, Marvel Studios and, Rotten Tomatoes for really feeding that group of people.
See, I think Rotten Tomatoes had to protect their reputation. If their whole sales pitch is you go to them to see what people think of a movie.
Mm-hmm.
If their statistics are not accurate or are provably inaccurate, then they lose their value. They're not a good gauge of what people are saying or people are thinking if they're easily manipulated. I always thought the idea that Rotten Tomatoes was protecting Disney was ludicrous
Mm-hmm.
because so many Disney movies get bad review scores. Wrinkle in Time got bad review scores. John Carter of Mars got bad review scores. It's not like every Disney movie scores a 90. It's like if that was the
Yeah.
case, if every movie from Disney was scoring a 90, then you have to say something is going on here. But I think it was more a case of Rotten Tomatoes saw that people were manipulating the score for their reasons, and it was getting out there that people were doing this. And I think it was a bad look for Rotten Tomatoes because you're taking away our legitimacy as a company. If people know
Mm-hmm.
that our scores are so easily manipulated, they're not going to take us seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, and something else that I just remembered. Remember back in like 2016 when Batman v Superman got destroyed by critics,
Yeah.
and everyone was saying, "Oh, Disney's paying off all the critics so they get the higher Rotten Tomato score, and they're just going to destroy DC because they're the competitor."
And
Yeah.
Kevin Feige came out at the time and said, "That's stupid. We want Warner Brothers and DC to succeed because too many people don't know the difference.
Mm-hmm.
There's too many people out there who aren't comic book nerds who just see a superhero movie and they don't know the difference between Marvel and DC. And a bad superhero movie looks bad for the superhero movie genre as a whole. So
Mm-hmm.
so it's like the more of these movies that are good, the more people are going to keep going to see them. So it's like it's not good for Marvel if DC fails. It's like you want the superhero movie train to keep rolling. And for
Mm-hmm.
that to happen, as many as possible of these movies have to be good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. How many people think that like Batman and Spider-Man are, in the same like universe kind of thing where
Well,
no one really knows the difference between Marvel and DC. Or I know I'm going to date this again, but even look at like Bloodshot with Vin Diesel that just came out. Who the hell is Bloodshot kind of thing? What's Vertigo? Was it? No, not Vertigo. What is it? Is it Valiant that did
Acclaim,
Bloodshot?
Valiant, yeah, Valiant, Acclaim.
Okay.
I think they went by two names. I think it was
Yeah.
Valiant Comics. Then they changed their name to Acclaim. I don't know if they went back
Hmm.
to being I don't know.
Yeah, because I was saying Vertigo, but it's like no, because wasn't that like an experimental arm of DC? Because that's where like John Constantine came from. John.
Vertigo was DC's mature readers
Yeah.
imprint.
Okay.
If anything was gonna have nudity and f bombs, it was gonna carry the Vertigo logo on
Yeah,
it.
because the two most famous from that I remember are Constantine and Preacher for
Yeah,
obvious reasons.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
But
but that is.
to show you how people get easily confused, I remember when Justice League, the movie Justice League came out, the post-credit scene had Lex Luthor sitting on his yacht, and Deathstroke, the character Deathstroke, shows up,
Mhm.
and there were people in the audience in the theater going, "It's Deadpool! It's Deadpool!"
Wow.
And in these people's minds, it was completely plausible that Deadpool could show up because they're like, "Oh, it's a superhero movie. Why couldn't Deadpool show up?" Like the Marvel DC barrier is not in the minds of the average. You look at my daughter playing with her toys, and she's like, "Daddy, Supergirl just put Doctor Octopus in jail," and you're sitting there like, "Well, that would never happen. Supergirl would
Hmm.
never fight Doctor Octopus, but she doesn't know that, and
Yeah.
my mom wouldn't know that." So.
Uh huh. Yeah. Yeah, that is true. Like, how many people know the difference between Marvel, DC, and then you've got all the indie publishers? Like we said, Valiant, IDW is another one because they have like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the Crow.
But here's a question for you.
Okay.
The Bloodshot movie was put out by Sony.
Yeah.
Sony put out the Bloodshot movie, and Sony has the rights to Spider-Man. So even though Spider-Man is a Marvel character and Bloodshot is a Valiant character, could they have Spider-Man and Bloodshot team up since they hold the film rights to both? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know, but
Uh-huh.
they do hold the film rights to both. So I would argue that's not out of the question. And there was a period of time, obviously, Disney just bought Fox. Fox is now owned
Hmm.
by Disney. But a couple of years ago, there was a rumor going around that Warner Brothers was trying to buy Fox. Now,
Hmm.
could you imagine if Warner Brothers bought Fox and suddenly Wolverine was in the Justice League movie because now Warner Brothers held the X-Men film rights? It sounds crazy, but if Warner Brothers bought Fox, that wouldn't have necessarily been out of the question.
No, man, if Warner Brothers bought Fox, it would be we want Wolverine versus Batman.
Oh, heads would have exploded if they made Justice League versus X-Men. If that movie
Uh-huh.
came out, and I'll tell you something, I
Did
would
it?
have been first in line to see it. So
Uh, yeah, didn't Marvel Comics do that with the X-Men movies where it was like Star Trek The Next Generation versus X-Men?
yeah,
Like they did that comic because Patrick Stewart was in both?
they did. Well, first was a comic book. First was a
Mm.
comic book called X-Men meets Star Trek meets X-Men, and it was Captain Kirk. Captain Kirk met the X-Men. Then they did a novel called Star Trek: The Next Generation and X-Men, and this time Picard met them. And then I think I don't know, they did a few different crossovers.
Yeah. All right, so I think we've pretty much covered Captain Marvel in the Rotten Tomatoes situation.
Yes, and tangented quite a bit. So
Yeah. So yeah, this is part of the fun of getting a special guest on. We can just tangent the conversation just goes where it goes. Yeah, I've got notes, but it's like, whatever. As long as we follow this, like we're fine. All right, so I guess it's time for number 15. Number
ooh,
15 is Ant-Man and the Wasp. Now, I personally rank this at number 10. You rank this at 16.
I like it. Yeah, no, this is a fun movie. I think it's better than the first one.
Mm-hmm.
I really, yeah, I don't know what more to say. I really enjoyed this one. I think it was better than the first one. That obviously the first one, as we said before, really mirrored Iron Man a lot in its plotting.
Yeah.
So I thought this was a more original story. I liked the whole quantum realm thing and how they brought back Janet Van
Yeah.
Dyne. And the villain was pretty interesting too.
Yeah, I like the villain. I like the villain in this movie quite a bit, Ghost, because this is like the one of the few times where like a villain is not fighting to like take over the world or get this new technology. She's literally just fighting to survive
Right.
because her spirit's being pulled between both the real world and the quantum realm.
Yeah. Yeah, and it
Hmm.
was the actress. I can't remember her name, but the actress is the star of a show on Sci-Fi Channel called Killjoys. And
Hmm.
I watched. I was a fan of Killjoys, so it was kind of cool seeing her in there. And
Hmm.
yeah, no, this was a fun one.
Yeah. I also like how this one showed the character relationship between was it Scott Lang as Ant-Man in these movies? Because I almost said Hank
Yes.
Pym, and it's like, no, it's not Hank Pym because Hank Pym's the guy that beat his wife. But yeah, Scott Lang and Hope Van Dyne, where you
Yeah.
finally get to see the two of them work together because they always teased it in the first movie, but you never actually saw it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
That's another thing is like I'm really hoping that Evangeline Lilly, who plays Hope, she's been coming under fire lately for some controversial remarks she made, and I know there's some people who saying, "Oh, she should be removed from the Ant-Man
Hmm.
movies," and I really hope they don't remove her because she was so good in the part, and she has such good chemistry with Paul Rudd. I think that the movie would suffer if she wasn't there. So I'm hoping that uh, I'm hoping that it just kind of smooths over and that
Yeah,
she's back in the third one.
yeah. No, who I hope is in the third Ant-Man movie is Matthew Fox, and Lost fans are going to pick up on that, and also some Family Guy fans because Matthew Fox and Evangeline Lilly in the same scene, and you just go, oh,
But
hope
don't they have to
we
bring in
are.
don't they have to bring in Sawyer too then? Doesn't Sawyer have to show up?
Yeah, so that would get a little too complicated. But I was thinking of that old Family Guy gag where it's like, with Matthew Fox's heavy breathing, and it's the whole Kate, we are the island. Oh God, he's breathing into like the paper bag.
I just hope that Rick Moranis shows up.
Yes, yes. As what's that doctor's name again? I know you just said it,
Dr.
but
Wayne Szalinski.
yep, and he works with Hank Pym, and then there you go.
Yeah,
Now it's not just a Marvel universe. It's hey, honey, I shrunk the kids.
that could be fun.
Yeah. So number 14 is gonna probably be a bit of a shock to you. That's Captain America: First Avenger. I ranked this at number 6. You ranked it at 20.
It's a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good movie. My only problem with it is it doesn't have an ending because it can't. It can't have an ending. He has to get frozen. He has
Mm-hmm.
to fall in the ice and get frozen. It's the way it has to happen. And the downside of that is the movie doesn't have an ending. It just kind of stops.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of kills the movie for me. But I also recognize they couldn't have done it any other way.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the movie, and
Yeah,
I like the World War II setting. I think it's a pretty good movie.
because with that, it's how are you going to get Steve Rogers from 1940s all the way to 2011 without aging a day, kind of thing.
Exactly.
So that super soldier serum. It's like, well, that doesn't make him not invulnerable, but you know what I'm trying to say, right? Where the guy doesn't age,
Right.
like Logan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but yeah, this one I actually really enjoyed watching. Steve Rogers grow as a character. Because you just see him as just an average everyday guy in the beginning. Then he goes from normal person to obviously the super soldier with the serum, and then the character Captain America becomes so popular he becomes a propaganda tool. Then he actually becomes a superhero at the end.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's fairly well done. The special effects
mhm,
of turning him so small and wimpy,
mhm.
it was really well done.
Yeah, and that one I actually have to give Joe Johnston the credit for that because he used to work with George Lucas back in the day, so it wouldn't surprise me if he picked up on techniques to learn how to shoot around that.
Yeah, and Joe Johnston, he's an underrated director. He
Yes.
I mean, he's really good. I mean, speaking of
Hmm.
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, he directed Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. He also did the Rocketeer with Timothy
Rocketeer.
Dalton.
Yep, and
Yeah, that movie gets unfairly shit on, but it's a good movie.
oh, yeah, I love that movie. That movie's terrific.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So, what would you think of Hugo Weaving as Red Skull?
he was pretty good. He was pretty
Hmm.
good, but as we later learned, he's not irreplaceable
Yeah.
because the guy who picked up the role in the last two Avengers movies, a lot of us weren't even sure. We were like, was that Hugo Weaving? They get him back?
I thought for sure they got Hugo Weaving back, but okay. Because I so badly wanted Red Skull to come in at some point, just go, Mr. Rogers. I also really loved the characters Peggy Carter and Howard Stark. Because at least
Yeah.
you get to see kind of the origins of Stark Industries from is it Tony Stark's grandfather was Howard?
No, his father.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how that would work because that's obviously a set in the 40s, and then if that was Tony's father and Iron Man was in '08, that's a pretty big time jump there.
But he was already dead then. He was
Yeah, that's
already because then we
yeah.
saw him in the film footage from Iron Man 2, and I guess that was supposed to be shot in the 70s,
Yeah.
and he was now played by what's the actor's name? John Slattery, I want to say, who then played the part again in Avengers Endgame. So yeah, that was Tony's dad.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that because like he's talking to like Tony directly as like a post-mortem kind of thing. Because spoiler for Avengers Endgame, because Tony did the exact same thing at the very end of that one with the
Yeah.
recorded message. So yeah, I forgot all about that. 23 movies. Try to keep all those straight. Oh, so you ready for number 13?
I am.
All right, number 13, Iron Man 3. I ranked this at 14. You ranked it at 11.
It's my favorite of the Iron Man movies. I really like this movie quite a bit. It
Mm-hmm.
we talked about it with what movie were we talking about? The Skrulls.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about how sometimes they'll deviate from the comics in order to take you by surprise. And we saw a real good example of that in this one, where we got the twist that the man we thought was the Mandarin wasn't the Mandarin. And I thought that
Yeah.
was brilliant. I remember sitting in the theater, and it was the same summer. I remember same summer, Iron Man 3 and Star Trek Into Darkness came out. And both movies had a twist. And I
Oh.
remember when Benedict Cumberbatch in Star Trek Into Darkness said, "My name is Khan." Nobody in the audience cared. Everybody was like, "Yeah, we know.
Uh-huh.
No, we figured that
Yeah.
out. We figured that out." But then you
Yeah.
think
I
Iron
was
Man,
that guy in the theaters. As soon as I heard that, I just sat back and I'm just like, done.
but then you get to Iron Man, and when we find out that Trevor was an actor, not the Mandarin, it
Mm-hmm.
was like, "Oh crap! I didn't see that coming."
Uh, See, that's actually the part I didn't like about Iron Man 3 because the entire movie is always building up to this big fight between Iron Man and the Mandarin, Iron Man and the Mandarin. And I was a comic reader, obviously, as I've brought up throughout this, and I really dug the Mandarin. And then it turns out that it's like, oh, he's just an actor putting on a character. And then the villain switches to some guy that Tony Stark screwed like 15 years ago. And it's like, okay, this came out of nowhere.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I think that scene where we found out he wasn't actually the Mandarin is probably my favorite scene in the movie, because I remember the first time I saw it just being so. Uh, they got me. They got me. I didn't see it coming. I was really surprised. Whereas that same summer, J.J. Abrams did not get me with the Khan reveal. So I was like,
Yeah.
this is a twist done right. That is a twist done terribly.
Yeah, I think with J.J. Abrams and the whole Star Trek Into Darkness, not meaning to deviate too far, but I think people's big fears with that one was that it was just going to be a remake of Wrath of Khan. And so, the marketing at the time was like, oh, no, 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 Benedict Cumberbatch is playing John Harrison. It's a completely new character. And then as soon as that scene came up with utter those four words, my name is Khan, how many people just threw their hands up and it's like, okay, yeah, that doesn't shock me.
What really got me in that movie, though, I know we're really going off track here, but what really got me in that movie was it managed to be its own movie, and it was carving out a nice story that was unique. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Khan, you had the character of Khan in the movie, but you weren't retelling the Wrath of Khan, and you weren't retelling Space Seed. You were doing a new story with Khan. I'm like, all right, whatever. This is fine. But then we got to the last 15 minutes, and we got Kirk's death scene.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly it was a shot for shot remake of the
Yes.
scene in Wrath of Khan. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
you've gone 2 hours without rehashing something you did before. And just when you were in the clear, and I'm like, oh no, this is okay. Rehash City. Here we go. And it's like, you had like 15 minutes left. You had 15
Mm-hmm.
minutes.
Yeah, and I guess the only difference is that Kirk was brought back to life using Khan's blood instead of being shot off to the Genesis planet that was
Right.
in search for Spock.
Which is so stupid because if
Mm-hmm.
Khan's blood cures death, nobody can die now because you still got him. You still got him and
Yep.
all his people in cryostasis. So anytime someone dies, you can be like, hey, crack open that stasis chamber, grab some blood. We need to bring this dude back.
Hmm. And one last thing I want to say on Iron Man 3 regarding the Mandarin is the Mandarin was such a cool character. Like, he was like the Tibetan monk that could, obviously access a bunch of magic. And then all of a sudden, ha ha ha, he's turned into funny joke. This is the first time that the MCU actually caved to the Chinese market in that regard. And I forgot to bring this up during Doctor Strange, but they did the same thing with the Great One, Tilda Swinton's character. What was her character? Was she the no, not the Great One, the Ancient One? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, where they were both like Tibetan monks, and obviously because China hates Tibet, it's like, oh, we gotta change these characters that way we can get into China.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah,
So yeah, as soon as I saw that, and some people thought it was a clever twist, but I automatically thought it's like, yeah, this is to get into just another market kind of thing. If they weren't forced to do it, would they have stuck with the Mandarin as the villain, being this Tibetan monk and using all this magic?
I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a fun what if game actually. And one other thing I forgot about, and I've brought this up in a couple of your live streams before, is Iron Man 3 deals obviously with Tony Stark's humanity. I felt that should have been handled in Iron Man 2 and not Iron Man 3. Because by Iron Man 3, like, Tony Stark should have been completely figured out, and it was just, balls to the wall. So Iron Man 1's the origin story. Okay, he's coming up. And then obviously the second one, he's got the downturn. And then the third one, he goes back up again like Spider-Man did with the Sam Raimi trilogy.
I really liked the aspect of him having like post-traumatic stress from his experience in Avengers, though. I thought that was a pretty cool aspect.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. Because I was about to say with the Iron Man trilogy, but like you brought up, it's like you can't really claim Iron Man's a trilogy because this is a cinematic universe, and we had Iron Man 2, and Avengers. So there was the third appearance. So actually, Iron Man 3 is his fourth appearance.
Yeah, yeah, and then we got him back the next year again in
Mm-hmm.
Avengers 2.
Yeah, Avengers 2, and then Civil War, and then Spider-Man. So yeah, speaking of Civil War, that's our number 12 is Captain America Civil War. You ranked it at 6, I ranked it at 18.
I really like Civil War. I think the title's wrong, though.
Mm-hmm.
It should not be called Captain America Civil War. It should be called Avengers Civil War. They did not make a Captain America 3. They made an Avengers 3. That is
Mm-hmm.
an Avengers movie. I'm
Well,
sorry. That's an Avengers
well,
movie.
all the fanboys are going to disagree with you because because Hulk's not in the movie, therefore it can't be Avengers.
Yeah, but I mean, Hulk was not in. Well, I mean, for like a second, I was gonna say Hulk really wasn't in Infinity War either. Banner
No.
was, Banner was,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah, because the Hulk wasn't coming out.
and Hawkeye wasn't uh in Infinity War either. We
Yeah.
did.
So why couldn't he do Mission Impossible 6 again if he wasn't in Infinity War?
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, so before we go off topic, the main thing I want to bring up with Civil War is that I want to bring up that it's an utter failure just based on the title alone. Because a movie that says Civil War in the title should accomplish two things: split the universe and split the fan base with Team Iron Man and Team Captain America, and it accomplished neither, in my opinion.
Well, that was the one thing in the comic book, Civil War, the comic book. When it came out, I remember Marvel was billing it as neither of these guys are necessarily right. Neither of these guys are necessarily wrong. It's up for the reader to decide. But when you call the movie Captain America Civil War
Mm-hmm.
and Chris Evans gets top billing, he's the main character in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and Robert Downey Jr. is now the co-star. Well, you've chosen sides.
Yeah.
That's no longer for the viewer to decide. You've chosen sides. No, Captain America, he's the hero of this film. His name's in the title. So yeah, I that's another reason why I don't think the movie should have been called Captain America Civil War. It should have been called Avengers Civil War, because as soon as you make Captain America the protagonist, you're telling us who's right, who we should be rooting for.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, so obviously the fight initially starts out with the whole Sokovia Accords, and it's like Tony Stark was like pro-government intervention on the Avengers, and Steve Rogers was completely against it, and that's why they initially fought at the airport. And then where did they go after that? Was that former Soviet Union, where it was revealed that like Bucky Barnes had killed Tony Stark's parents?
I think so.
Yeah, and then the fight like stopped being about pro-government and less government regulation and about you killed my parents and how dare you defend this guy even though he was your friend and was brainwashed at the time.
Right.
I saw that just as a cheap tactic to get the two characters back fighting together.
Yeah, it did effectively break the team to the point that when Infinity War happens, there's no more Avengers. The Avengers have chosen their sides. Some of them are gone. Some of them are in hiding. But it definitely didn't balance it. It definitely didn't make it like. And they did make Tony Stark look very. He was very much the bad guy of the movie. Tony Stark was the bad guy. There was no question about it. You can't walk away and say, "Oh, well, Tony was right," because the movie consistently told you Tony wasn't right. I'll tell you who did come off better in that movie was Rhodey, because at the end when Rhodey's in rehab and he's telling Tony like why he backed him, Rhodey sounded much more reasonable than Tony did, and you're like, okay, he put up a much more credible argument.
Yeah. And my thing with Civil War is that all the movies after this really didn't reference the events until Avengers Infinity War. So Doctor Strange, there was no mention of it because obviously we had to focus more on Doctor Strange. But the one that I thought would actually mention it even more was Spider-Man Homecoming, because they showed the Peter's vlogs and the fact that Tony Stark is coming in and being his mentor. But outside of those vlogs, there's almost no mention of any events.
The one thing I really enjoy in Spider-Man Homecoming is when the gym coach puts on the tape of Captain America giving them some public service announcement, and he says, technically this guy's a war criminal, but I'm still supposed to show you this. I thought that was really fun.
Yeah. Yeah, but if I can talk today. I think you get what I'm saying, where it's like this is supposed to be a big universe-changing effect, and it just not even a ripple in regards to the movies.
Yeah, no, I could see that.
Yeah, and then by Infinity War, obviously the two sides get back together, and hey, best friends again 2 years after they supposedly fought and broke up.
But now, if I remember correctly, I'm trying to remember. Tony and Steve Rogers, they don't have any scenes together in Infinity War, do they? Like, it's not until Endgame after they've gotten there, because Tony immediately went off into space.
Yeah.
And because
Spider-Man followed him, yeah.
Right. So it's not until Endgame that those two characters get reunited again.
Yeah. Okay.
And even then, it's not a happy reunion. Tony's,
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, I forgot about that. So yeah. Yeah, I mean, we'll get to that when we get to Infinity War, obviously.
Yeah.
So this concludes part 2 of the 3-hour collaboration. Come back tomorrow to watch the final part of our Marvel Cinematic Universe Infinity Saga ranking.